They will never tell you they dislike you, not directly. That would be too easy, too clean. Instead, they'll show you, in shadows, in silence, in smiles that don't quite reach their eyes. But what if I told you that ancient wisdom has already taught us how to see these signs? That the Stoics, warriors of thought, philosophers of discipline, left behind a lantern, glowing with timeless truths, truths that reveal everything about human nature, and about how others truly see you? Tonight, we descend into a realm most men fear to explore, not because it's filled with monsters, but because it reflects something even more dangerous, the hidden face of contempt. We're not here to play games. We're here to unlock 7 signs, forged from silence, sharpened by time, wrapped in subtle cruelty. Signs that someone truly dislikes you. Not dislikes your style, not your opinions, you. And the signs are never loud. They are precise, surgical, chilling in their elegance. Seneca once said, "A sword never kills anybody. It is a tool in the killer's hand." Likewise, these signs are tools. Tools that reveal deeper truths about envy, resentment, weakness, and strength. But here's the twist, and the reason you must stay. This is not just a list of observations. This is a mirror. Because the way others behave toward you is never just about them. It's about you, who you are becoming, who you threaten, what you awaken in others that they cannot face in themselves. Epictetus warned, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. What if the signs of dislike were actually signs of your power? Your presence, your refusal to be like the rest? This video is not a warning. It's a map through the fire, through discomfort, through envy and rejection. And when you walk through these 7 signs, you won't walk out weaker. You'll walk out sharper, calmer, unshakable, because that's the gift of Stoicism. Not to avoid the storm, but to become the eye of it. So lean in. This is not entertainment. This is a reckoning. The ancient Stoics trained for war, not just of the body, but of the soul. If you're here, it's because you are ready. And if you finish this journey, you will never misread another person again. The 7 things they do when they dislike you. Revealed, explained, understood. Through the eyes of Stoicism and the mind of a man becoming untouchable. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Every like, subscribe helps us continue our mission of sharing knowledge. And leave a comment below and share your opinion on these things, or tell me which one resonates with you the most. Ready to unlock more wisdom? Let's get started. Thing 1. They withhold recognition, even when it's earned. There is a certain silence that is louder than applause, a pause that echoes louder than praise. When someone dislikes you but wants to keep it concealed, they don't attack, they withhold. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you've done something right. This is the first sign. Subtle, elegant, deadly. They refuse to acknowledge your achievements, your progress, your effort, not openly, not fairly, not honestly. Because to recognize you, even slightly, would be to elevate you, and that is something their pride cannot afford. You'll notice it when you speak. You'll say something insightful, and they'll blink and change the subject. You'll offer value, and they'll pretend not to hear. You'll rise, and they'll look in the opposite direction, pretending not to notice the sun creeping over the horizon. But the Stoics? They noticed this long before we did. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In this case, your enemy is not a sword-wielding soldier or a shouting rival. It's the quiet resistance of the insecure, the invisible wall of envy, painted as indifference. They know what you're doing. They see the effort. They feel the heat of your ambition. But they will deny you the smallest flicker of acknowledgement, not because you're unworthy, but because you remind them of everything they are not. You see, mediocrity finds safety in sameness. When one man begins to rise, silently, patiently, without complaint, it disturbs the stagnant pool where others rest. You become a ripple, and that ripple threatens to become a wave. That's when they look away. That's when they pretend you're still the same. Seneca warned, it is the power of the mind to be unconquerable. But what they fear is not your mind. It's your growth, your discipline, your refusal to stay where they left you. You will find this sign not just in strangers, but in people close to you. Family, friends, colleagues, people who once celebrated you until you began evolving beyond their expectations. The moment you stepped outside the version of you they were comfortable with, the applause stopped. Not because you changed for the worse, but because you became someone they could no longer predict or control. You must understand this deeply. When people truly dislike you, they rarely insult you to your face. They simply deny your existence as a rising force. And here's where it gets dangerous. If you are not rooted in something deeper, if you don't anchor yourself in philosophy, in self-discipline, in inner approval, this silent rejection can unmake you. It can plant doubt. It can make you crave validation from the very ones who withhold it. And once you start performing for their recognition, you hand over your power. But a Stoic never begs for applause. He knows that recognition is sweet, but irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the truth of your path. Did you act with courage? Did you improve yourself? Did you resist the urge to prove yourself to those who cannot see you? That is all that matters. When they dislike you, they'll pretend they didn't notice the change. They'll greet your victories with silence. They'll look through you, hoping you'll shrink back into something safer, smaller, more acceptable. But the Stoic man does not retreat for comfort. He does not crave handshakes from those who fear his light. He simply continues. Because true recognition, the only recognition that matters, is internal. It is private. It is forged in solitude. It is earned when no one claps and you still continue walking uphill. So if they never say well done, if they never say I see you, if they never say you've grown, smile. Because their silence is proof that you've moved beyond their grasp. This is thing one. The first mark of quiet resentment. Not anger, not mockery, not confrontation. Just the calm, calculated choice to pretend you're invisible. Let them. Because a man with purpose does not need to be seen. He only needs to see clearly. And when you see clearly, you recognize that their silence is the first echo of your power. Thing two. They subtly compete with you in conversations that shouldn't be a competition. There's a moment, sharp, invisible, and undeniable, when a conversation shifts. You're not talking anymore. You're defending. You're no longer sharing your experience. You're being measured. Silently, strategically, and often by someone who says they're just listening. This is the second sign. Not loud, not obvious, but chilling in its accuracy. When someone dislikes you, they will not always criticize you. Instead, they will begin to compete with you in disguise, not in arenas of strength or war, but in ordinary, daily conversations where no contest should exist. And yet, suddenly you find yourself in one. You speak about a win, small, humble, a habit you've built, a book you've read, a struggle you've overcome, and their eyes tighten, their tone shifts, and then with a smile they respond, "Oh yeah, I've been doing that for years. I actually do something better." That's good, but you know what's even more effective? The Stoics called this vanity of the insecure mind. Epictetus warned, if someone points out your faults and you fail to notice them, you have a greater fault. But what about when someone points to your strength and tries to cover it with their own insecurity? This sign is not about disagreement. It's about disruption. They cannot let your moment breathe. They cannot let your story stand on its own. They must step in, compare, one-up, elevate themselves quietly, constantly, unnecessarily. Why? Because your presence threatens their identity. When you speak of growth, they feel small. When you show discipline, they feel exposed. And instead of confronting that feeling, they disguise it under sarcasm, casual jokes, comparisons, or unsolicited advice. But the real message? You're not better than me, even when you weren't trying to be. A wise man once said, the person who is truly at peace with himself does not need to win every interaction. The Stoic does not speak to prove. He speaks to offer, to observe, to understand. But when your offering triggers envy, the insecure listener doesn't reply to your words. They reply to what your words represent. Your strength reminds them of their weakness. Your progress reminds them of their stagnation. And so the conversation becomes an invisible battlefield. They won't shout, they won't insult, they'll just raise their flag subtly, higher than yours. Let me tell you how I do it. Have you tried this instead? I'm surprised you didn't know that already. Don't fight it, because the Stoic never enters a contest he didn't agree to. He doesn't engage in ego duels disguised as dialogue. He listens, he smiles, he sees, and then he withdraws his need to be understood. Seneca reminds us we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And often, the imagination of the insecure is what causes these battles. They imagine that you're trying to outshine them. They imagine that you're seeking validation. They imagine that your strength is a mirror held to their face and they hate the reflection. But you were just speaking your truth. You weren't bragging. You weren't competing. You were sharing. This is the silent war many men walk into without realizing, especially men who evolve. Because evolution disturbs comfort. And those around you, friends, colleagues, even mentors, may feel that disturbance not as inspiration, but as a threat. So what should you do? Nothing. Not because you're weak, but because you don't need to win. You are not here to collect trophies from conversations. You are not here to battle for attention. You are here to build, to grow, to become. And becoming is not a contest. Let them talk. Let them subtly correct you. Let them name drop, compete, and decorate their insecurities with polished words. You don't need to tear them down. Just see them clearly, because once you do, their need to compete becomes irrelevant. You'll stop answering invisible challenges. You'll stop explaining yourself. And your calm will do the one thing they fear most: expose the difference between performance and presence. This is thing two. When they dislike you, they try to outshine you in conversations where you never sought a spotlight. They mask their envy with friendly words, but the current is unmistakable. And if you are wise, you will stop swimming against it. Instead, you'll let it flow around you, while you remain rooted, still, powerful, unbothered. Thing three. They celebrate your failures louder than your successes. You will know who truly stands beside you not when you win, but when you stumble. Watch closely, not when you shine, but when you fall. Because when someone dislikes you, they might never dare to attack you at the peak, but they will emerge the moment you slip. This is the third sign, perhaps the most human, the most painful. They won't always mock your failure. They won't openly laugh or ridicule you. No, that would expose them too clearly. Instead, they will show subtle joy, masked as neutrality. They will find relief in your imperfection. And suddenly the silence that greeted your success will turn into a gentle hum of engagement. They'll become more talkative, more attentive, when you're broken, when you're humbled, when the thing you were building cracks and wobbles and bleeds. Seneca once said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." But the man who dislikes you doesn't see your trials as noble. He sees them as validation, proof that you're not as disciplined, not as intelligent, not as beyond reach as you once appeared. He needed you to fail, not because he hates you, but because your success exposed his own hesitation to grow. And your failure, however temporary, soothes him. When you were disciplined, you were a mirror. When you stumbled, the mirror cracked, and for a moment he can breathe. They say the strongest friendships are forged in fire, but the opposite is also true. The quietest resentment hides in comfort. The one who smiles when you speak of your goals, nods when you rise, cheers in words but not in spirit, will show their truth when the wave crashes. You'll notice how their voice becomes brighter when you talk about a mistake, how they suddenly have advice after being silent through all your victories, how they chuckle a bit too long at your misstep, how they say, "See, I told you that wouldn't work." The Stoics were not naive. They never assumed all men wished them well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." This was not pessimism. It was armor. You do not go into the world hoping for universal support. You go into the world armored by inner clarity, ready to meet not just obstacles, but envy disguised as interest. So what do you do when they celebrate your setbacks? Nothing. You do not need to call them out. You do not need to make them understand. Because a man bound by Stoic principles does not live to be comforted. He lives to be sharpened. And here's the truth most cannot bear. Your failure, when processed with discipline, becomes more terrifying to them than your success ever was. Because now you are rising again. Now you are becoming stronger. Now you are not just ambitious, you are resilient. And resilience cannot be envied. It can only be feared. Because the man who succeeds once may have been lucky, but the man who fails publicly, suffers deeply, and keeps rising anyway, he is no longer a competitor. He is a force. So when they smile at your fall, let them. When they seem a little too calm during your storm, let them. You don't owe them a reaction, because your storm is not permanent, And when the sun returns, and it will, they will shrink back into the shadows where they always lived. This is thing 3. The celebration of your pain masked as support. The cheerful commentary when you trip. The sudden interest in your life. Once you're no longer a threat, recognize it. Don't resent it. Because once you do, you'll no longer be surprised by it. You'll simply smile, rebuild, and rise so quietly, so unshakably, that their silence once again becomes deafening. Thing 4. They offer advice you never asked for, cloaked as concern but rooted in superiority. There is a kind of advice that does not come from love. It comes from discomfort. Not your discomfort, theirs. This is the 4th sign. When someone dislikes you but refuses to admit it, even to themselves, they may not mock you, challenge you, or oppose you outright. Instead, they become your self-appointed guide. Uninvited, unnecessary, and deeply revealing. You'll be walking your path, focused, building in silence. You'll be doing well, not perfect but improving. And then one day they appear, with a suggestion, a tip, a concern. They phrase it gently. Hey, I've been meaning to tell you. Be careful with that. Just looking out for you. You might be overdoing it. Don't burn yourself out. Not everything needs to be so serious, you know? But underneath the soft tone is a blade. Not a sharp one, a dull, slow, dragging kind of blade. And it cuts at your momentum. Not directly, but sideways. Not with insult, but with interruption. Because what they offer is not wisdom. It is doubt, wrapped in concern, painted with familiarity, but rooted in something far less noble, the desire to pull you just slightly off track. Why? Because your progress threatens the equilibrium. Your discipline shames their delay. Your commitment exposes their excuses. And rather than confronting their own inactivity, it's easier for them to appear as the helpful critic, the mentor who never mentored, the wise observer who's suddenly full of insights once you start changing. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Yet these people would rather talk about your life than examine their own. They want to shape you, not because they care, but because your direction makes them feel directionless. And reshaping you, even a little, gives them the illusion of control. You'll notice the pattern. They rarely offered guidance when you were idle. When you were lost, they left you alone. But now in your discipline, in your silence, in your visible progress, suddenly they're invested, not in your growth, in keeping it manageable. Stoicism teaches that the wise man listens, observes, and acts. He does not meddle. He does not advise unasked, because he understands that unsolicited advice is often the ego disguised as service. So ask yourself, why now? Why this advice? Why the tone of gentle superiority, the faint trace of condescension masked as just looking out for you? Seneca warned, "He who is brave is free." But they don't want you free. They want you tethered, gently, quietly, and visibly, by their opinions. They want you to believe that they still know better. This is not to say all advice is toxic. Wisdom exists, humility listens, but you will feel the difference. Because real advice uplifts, it clears fog, it sharpens vision, it challenges, yes, but it does not belittle. It does not arrive with a smirk. It does not come only when you've begun to outgrow the speaker. This is thing 4. The unsolicited advice that reveals discomfort, not care. A disguised reminder that they are watching. Not to see you rise, but to make sure you don't rise too far. To keep you grounded, not in humility, but in hesitation. Do not be cruel. Do not react with anger. But do not obey. Because not every opinion deserves a seat at your table. And not every voice that sounds calm is offering peace. Sometimes it's offering a leash, decorated with politeness. But a leash, nonetheless. The Stoic listens not to please, but to understand. And once he understands, once he sees the intent behind the words, he steps back. He thanks them, if needed. And then he continues forward, untouched. Because the path of the disciplined man is not carved by consensus. It is carved by clarity. And clarity never asks for permission. Thing 5. They imitate you without acknowledging you. There is a silence that speaks louder than praise. A silence that follows you like a shadow. Not out of admiration, but out of quiet resistance. This is the 5th sign. One of the strangest, one of the most subtle. They begin to mirror you, your words, your habits, even your values, but they never mention you, never quote you, never point to you as an influence. They imitate without acknowledgement. It begins as a ripple. You adopt a new discipline, waking early, training harder, eating cleaner, reading with purpose. You notice a shift in your tone, deeper, more still, more grounded. You become more measured, more discerning. Your energy changes. You stop chasing, you start becoming. And somewhere in the background, they notice. They take note, but not with respect, with unease. Because they cannot deny your growth, but they refuse to applaud it. Instead, they copy pieces of it, quietly. They adjust their voice, alter their words, change their habits. Suddenly they're speaking about philosophy. Suddenly they're journaling. Suddenly they're building routines they once dismissed. But they never say where the spark came from. They avoid the trace. They replicate the effect while rejecting the source. Why? Because to acknowledge you would be to concede something. That you were first, that you inspired, that your steps carved a path worth following. But for the one who harbors silent disdain, that is too much. So they pretend their transformation bloomed in isolation, as if your presence played no part, as if they arrived at the same truth by different stars. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." But what if the injustice is not attack, but imitation without honor? The Stoic does not seek credit. He does not live to be celebrated, but he observes, he notices. And what he notices in this moment is not admiration. It is ego. An ego that cannot bear to be seen as a follower, even while following. An ego that steals silently, adopting what works, while pretending to be the architect. This behavior is not rooted in inspiration. It is rooted in insecurity. Because when someone dislikes you but cannot deny your excellence, they will try to absorb it without associating with you. They want what you have, without admitting you have it. So they imitate in fragments. Enough to grow, but never enough to thank. Enough to resemble, but never enough to honor. And that is the quiet theft of the insecure soul. Seneca said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." But this kind of person does not associate. They orbit. They watch. They extract. And still, you do not react. Because for the Stoic, the goal was never recognition. The goal was truth. The path was inward. And imitation, whether credited or not, is not a threat. It is a signal. It shows that what you are doing matters. That your silence speaks louder than their performance. That your change, though unannounced, has shaken something in them. So what should you do? Nothing. Let them mimic. Let them borrow. Let them pretend. Because the truth is, they are changing despite themselves. Even their resistance could not protect them from your presence. You have already won. Not in competition, but in influence. And real influence does not need applause to validate its reach. This is thing 5. They imitate your essence, but deny your presence. They take your shape, but not your name. They echo your discipline while pretending they never heard your voice. And that's fine, because the Stoic does not demand tribute. He walks ahead, undistracted, undivided, and in his wake, others change, willingly or not. In the end, let them become better through your example, even if they never say your name. Because the deeper truth is this: they already know it. Thing 6. They question your intentions, never your results. When someone dislikes you but does not have the courage to oppose your outcomes, they will aim their arrows not at what you've done, but why you did it. They cannot deny your progress. They cannot criticize the shape of your results. So instead, they whisper doubts into the air, into others, and sometimes even into your own mind. Why is he really doing that? Is it about growth, or is he trying to prove something? Is this authentic, or is it just for attention? He acts disciplined, but you never know someone's true motives. This is thing 6. A quiet war, not against your actions, but your heart. Not against your discipline, but against the purity of your intent. It is the subtle poison of suspicion. Not spoken as accusation, but as suggestion. They will never say, "You are false." They will say, "I wonder what's really driving him." This tactic is as old as philosophy itself. Socrates was accused of corrupting the youth, not because he harmed them, but because he influenced them too deeply. His prosecutors couldn't defeat his logic, so they questioned his motives. It is easier to dismantle a man when you make others believe he is not real. That's what this is. When they see your dedication, but can't match it, they will say you are doing too much. When they see your clarity, but lack their own, they will say you are too rigid. When they see your confidence but feel threatened, They will say you are arrogant in disguise. And when your choices begin to pull you away from the crowd, they will brand you as a man acting out of emptiness, not purpose. But why? Because when your life begins to speak louder than their words, they no longer feel superior in silence. They begin to feel judged, without you saying a thing. That's what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "Waste no more time talking about what a good man should be. Be one." Because being one, without declaration, without applause, is a mirror. And some people hate mirrors, especially when they reflect what they could have become had they chosen differently. And so they will begin to talk, not always to you, but around you. They will raise questions about your character, not because they know something, but because they don't. And what they don't understand, they cannot accept. You wake up earlier. Why is he trying so hard? You read more. What's he compensating for? You detach from shallow habits. He's acting like he's above everyone. You speak less. He thinks he's mysterious now. They don't know who you are becoming, and they need to explain it to themselves. So they don't challenge your outcome. They challenge your soul. They make your intent the battlefield, because that is a war they can wage in whispers. And in whispers, no evidence is required. Seneca warned us, the mind that is anxious about future events is miserable. But even more miserable is the mind that cannot celebrate another man's calm. The man who sees peace in your eyes and feels only envy in his chest. And here's the Stoic truth they do not understand. You do not act for approval. You do not train to be praised. You do not write to be shared. You do not meditate, fast, journal, discipline yourself because you want to be seen. You do it because it is right, because it shapes your inner world, because you are no longer willing to let chaos run the kingdom of your mind. But they don't believe that. They can't believe that, because if it's true, if your actions are sincere, then their laziness is just that, laziness. And their judgment is just noise. So what do? They frame you. Not with lies, with insinuations. They poke holes in your motives. They label your clarity as control. They interpret your silence as smugness. They twist your strength into performance. But here's the beautiful, brutal truth. You don't owe them clarity. You owe only yourself alignment. The Stoic does not defend himself with words. He lets the weight of his consistency speak for him. He lets time reveal the shape of his soul. And over time, the noise around your motives will fade, and the substance of your outcomes will remain. This is thing 6. They question the man behind the action, because the action speaks too loudly. They search for impurity, not because they see it, but because they hope for it. They want your foundation to be false, so they can feel justified in standing still. Let them wonder, let them speculate, let them talk. You stay still, you stay calm, you keep walking. And one day they will run out of questions, and you will still be standing quiet, unwavering, real. Thing 7. They celebrate your setbacks, silently but sincerely. There is a kind of applause you'll never hear. It echoes in silence, it hides behind polite expressions, but you will feel it, unmistakably. This is the final sign, the one they cannot mask. The deepest indication that someone does not wish you well, even if they dress their face in smiles. They celebrate your setbacks, not with fireworks, not with laughter, but with a breath of relief, a quiet exhale. A private smirk behind closed doors. Not because you failed, but because your fall reminded them they are not alone in standing still. This is thing 7. Not hatred, not confrontation, but hidden satisfaction at your stumble. They don't mock you openly. They may even offer words of sympathy. That's tough, man. You'll bounce back. Happens to the best of us, but behind those words is something darker. A comfort, a secret pleasure. Not because they are evil, but because your momentum made them anxious, and your pause is their proof that you're still human, still beatable, still flawed. Marcus Aurelius said, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake in any thought or action, I shall gladly change, for I seek the truth." But these people don't seek truth. They seek balance. Not balance in the world, but balance in their self-worth. And your rise threatened that balance. Your growth unsettled their story. Your discipline disproved their excuses. Your quiet strength made them question their comfort. And so when you stumble, even slightly, they finally breathe, because now they don't have to change. Now they can say, "See, he's just like the rest of us. Told you it was just a phase." All that effort, and for what? They won't say it to your face, but they say it inside, and you'll see it in their eyes. That flicker of relief, that brief spark of validation. They'll cover it quickly, of course, but not before you see it, because envy doesn't always attack with sharp teeth. Sometimes it smiles while it watches you fall. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." And the man who celebrates your pain is starving, not for success, but for reasons not to try. Your setbacks give him food. They give him evidence that effort is overrated, that striving is a trap, that your journey was never real. Because if your failure is real, then his stillness feels safe again. This is where you must be strongest, not in your performance, but in your perspective. You must see clearly, this is not about you. Their celebration is not personal, it's internal. They are not cheering your fall, they are cheering the return of their comfort, because your rise required them to look at themselves. And nothing terrifies the small soul more than honest self-reflection. So what do? You rise anyway. Without spectacle, without announcement, you rise again. Because the Stoic understands, the fall is not shameful, it is sacred. Each stumble refines you, each delay teaches patience, each obstacle forces clarity, and each failure, no matter how it is perceived by others, is another weight pressed into the iron of your mind. You do not rise to prove them wrong. You rise because stillness is death to the man who has tasted growth. Let them whisper, let them smirk, let them keep score in secret. You keep walking, because their joy at your fall does not slow the man who has seen his own darkness and chosen to keep going. Their relief is noise, their reaction is dust. And when you rise again, not to impress, but to live, they will fall silent. Not because they respect you, but because they no longer know what to say. This is thing 7. They find peace in your pain, because your power once made them restless. They cheer your delay. Not because they hate you, but because your motion made them question their sleep. And now they can rest again, but not you, because your rest is earned, not stolen from another man's struggle. You will rise in silence, stronger, calmer, untouched. And that is the kind of return no whisper can deny.